He is a model example as to how you traverse the sports media landscape. My guest today is JJ Leonard. He works with NESN, senior producer with their sports betting shows, two shows that just came out back in May. We're going to talk about them, NESN Lunchline and NESN Ultimate Betting Show. We're going to have some fun touching on that, touching on his career from a professional standpoint, and then also learning more about him as a father and from a personal standpoint as well. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, also a broadcaster as well for live events. JJ, I find your career so fascinating because I found that you have really channeled the idea of evolving with the times. How do you feel like you've done that so well through each era and job and stint you've had in this ever-changing landscape of sports?
Yeah, I mean, I think I started, in the business right around Y2K. So it was just kind of a big change right from there, just going from, how we use the internet for everything that we do now. It's funny, we've kind of I went through the whole digital revolution, and that's kind of, I helped, with when I was in Chicago with Stadium and its predecessors. We kind of were kind of the first ones kind of doing an all digital show, all social media show. And then a lot of it wasn't on purpose. It was just kind of the way fate took me that, now that, sports betting is kind of grown, and with the legalization in so many states, that I was able to get into that. It was always something that I kind of knew and was passionate about, and just the opportunity was there. So I've taken it, and it wasn't something that I sat down with, 20 years ago and said, this is how I have things planned out. It's just kind of, I've evolved and the market's evolved, and I've kind of just been in the right place at the right time.
Let's go to those two shows that you're working on with NESN. You're talking about sports gambling, NESN Lunchline and NESN Ultimate Betting Show. From I can just feel an aura of pride from you and the role that you and your team have put on to get this out there. In those beginning stages, and as you're formulating what you want to do with the content and the show format, how are you able to sort of add your point of view to now what we're seeing on television today?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing that we're trying to do with our show is, and our shows, is that we're trying to find that the middle ground where we're not talking down to like experienced bettors, but we're also trying to teach, sports fans that are just coming on to sports betting. I mean, it's not even legal in Massachusetts. Yeah, we're hoping that it'll be legal soon, but in all the surrounding states, and obviously 30 plus states around the country. So it's become mainstream. So we're trying to find the middle ground where we can be a teacher, an entertainer, and also give you good bets and talk to the people who do know what they're doing. So that's where it's been tricky, but I've been, working with our team. We got, Sam Paniotovich and Claudia Bellafato and Travis Thomas. We're all great, and we've all worked together. And like you said, since mid-May, we've been doing 2 shows a day, and the feedback's been positive so far. So, I hope everyone tunes in. We're on, nesnbets.com on digital at 1 p.m. Eastern every day, and then on NESN if you're in the region. So, yeah, I think we've found a good spot where the show can, any average sports fan can watch it and get something out of it, or the serious bettor can get something out of it as well.
What's the best bet, JJ, you've had on yourself when it comes to your career?
Best bet. Well,
You've taken
I
on
guess,
yourself.
yeah, I mean, for the first 14 years of my career, I worked in local news down in Florida, made the rounds, around, I think I was the first person that worked at all 4 of the major, affiliates in Miami in the calendar year. But I settled in there. I was there for about 8 years. And at one point, my daughter got sick. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so my wife needed to take some time off work. So, I was offered a job in Chicago at a brand new up and coming network, which ended up being Stadium. At the time, it was called Total College Sports. It was with Silver Chalice. And, my wife and I did a lot of kind of talking and soul searching, and running numbers, and we said let's take a chance. So we did it. We made a move to Chicago, and that kind of launched my move from local news into national and regional sports.
How has your daughter, going back to what you said, been an inspiration to you?
Oh, since she was 4 years old, when she was diagnosed. She's been unbelievable. Just if you knew her, I wouldn't even need to describe it. She's great, and she's a straight A honor roll student in school. She's played sports. She does everything, and now she's wanted to be an actress, and now she's taking that next step. She's done some shows, she's done some movies, and now she's filming a big show out in LA. So extremely proud of her.
How were you there sort of when the idea of her and her dreams of working in acting were starting to come about? What did you do, JJ, to help push her in that direction, believe in her, support her, and tell her to live out these goals and aspirations that she has?
Sure. While we were in Chicago, and I have to give a lot of the credit to my wife too, who's kind of taking on the role of, kind of stage mother, if you will, and kind of has been the one to really drive her around to a lot of the auditions and places. And we just got her with a great team in Chicago with her manager, and they've been great. They've kind of led her in the right direction, and then my wife and I just provided all the support and time that we can for her to do what she needs to do.
Acting, in a sense, a good actor can play other people, but they can also play themselves as well if they
Mhm.
need to. How do you feel like you, JJ, have best represented or played yourself, your authentic self? Where does that come out the most in what you do in work?
I think that the biggest thing is that I'm always just straightforward with everybody. If you know what I'm feeling, you know what I want, and I just try to lay out expectations for everybody as far as what the show goes. One of the big jokes I think in our business is that we're in the communication business, but nobody communicates. But I try, that's kind of where I try to shine, is just to communicate with everybody face to face, if possible. I know in the Zoom world that we're in now, that's not always possible, but just to lay out expectations, know what I expect and what I need for my shows. And I think I'm a great teammate, so I think we've been doing a great job here, and I think I've been pretty successful in all the stops along the way.
My guest today is senior producer, sports betting at NESN, JJ Leonard. I'm Bryan Fenley. You brought up the word teammate. I saw this picture of you playing basketball at the Miami Heat arena. I want to know, you on the court, what kind of teammate you're like when you're on the hardwood.
I've always considered myself to be a point guard, so I like to kind of be the leader of the team, but kind of be the one that's kind of being the one that's making the pace of the game, being in charge of the pace of the game. The leader, but can also score when I need to. Not quite as agile and athletic as I was when you saw those pictures. I think those were probably from 10 to 15 years ago. So, but I'm still trying at my age to try to get out on the courts every once in a while, and try to stay in shape at my ripe old age that I'm at now. So,
I would say ripe young age. I beg to differ on you on that. Point guard in basketball, how can you see you being sort of a point guard as to how you look at the business and how you operate there?
I think that's if you would ask me to describe if I played a position on our team here, I would think I'm the point guard. I kind of set up the offense and kind of distribute to who needs to do what, and make sure everyone's in the right place at the right time. So I think that would be a great analogy as to what I do on a daily basis at work. So.
How do you feel like being in the right place at the right time, timing has played into your success as well, depending upon where you were, the
Mhm.
stops? Obviously, you've got the talent and everything else that comes with that, but the timing factor, how has that come into play in your career too?
Yeah, I've a lot of luck for
Oh, stop
one.
it.
But no, I mean, I've worked with a lot of great people, and I think a big part in this business is knowing people and networking and getting to know people. So, at times when I needed it, because we've all had, we've had our ups and downs in this business, and just knowing and reaching out to the right people, and being ready when your number's called, I think is the big thing. And just knowing what you want. I have strong support with my wife and my daughter and my son, and they've been willing to we've in the last few years we've moved around the country a lot. We've lived we moved from Chicago to Las Vegas and now to Boston here. So um, they've been great, and just kind of like I said, a lot of luck and a lot of preparation. I think that kind of the two things equal being in the right place at the right time.
How has being a husband and a father made you a better sports producer?
Sure. Well, a good part of that is my wife is also in the business as well. So she's an editor. That's where we met in local news down in Florida. So her understanding of kind of the business, the needs, the hours, um, has really helped. I guess would be a better husband, just because obviously working with someone who you share that with, they kind of have an understanding of everything that's going on. And you know as a father, I don't know how, I'm not sure how work would do it. I mean, I try to teach them hard work. That's one of the things that I've always tried to instill in them. But I would, the father, I think I get from my parents, from my dad and my mom. They've kind of instilled that in me too. So
What also do they instill in you, sort of the big tenets of, like, if I met you, JJ, when you were in high school or you were in college at, I believe, Central Florida, like, what would I learn about you back then to tell me that one day that you would start in local television, you would work in several different markets there, and then continue to grow from there?
I mean, from the time I was 4 years old, I think I knew I wanted to work. Well, maybe at four, I wanted to be an athlete, but somewhere along the line, you kind of come to the realization that pro sports is probably not in your path. That I think it was around fourth grade or so is when I really started in TV. It was on the TV news in fourth grade, and from that moment, I mean, if you asked me from that moment on what I was going to be, it was going to be, in TV. Whether at one point it was more, oh, I want to be on camera, but I think probably around high school I realized that I enjoyed kind of the creativity and the work that goes on behind the scenes more than I did want to be in front of the camera. So from there I started working. I mean, in high school I was on our broadcast news all the way up through college. At UCF I was on the nightly news there as a producer, and so I just think I've always known what I wanted to do. There was never really any wavering in that.
How often do you go back and watch those tapes, like fourth grade, or
Yeah,
if you, I'm assuming at times you were able to be on the desk yourself.
sure.
Or yeah. So if you were to, and even if you haven't,
Mhm.
in some time gone back, or even just sort of reliving, reimagining what that's like, the experienced seasoned sports media pro you are today, what would you say about maybe the way you were on camera back then as someone growing up?
Yeah, it's funny. I was never someone who was that got really comfortable in front of the camera. I always had, this a little bit of nervousness there that I would tell myself back then, and I've learned now, like, you know, don't worry so much. It's it's not that big of a deal if you say the wrong thing. If you move on to the next show, you move on to the next day, and just calm down. It's not the end of the world. Nothing matters that much.
And then obviously you made the transition into behind the scenes in college, and then sports producing, and then
Mhm.
even got the opportunity to play on the Miami Heat stadium court, or the arena court, which was really fun. JJ Leonard is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. We talked as well, JJ, earlier about how you've been there to empower your kids, but sort of to kind of turn that around. and you see what your daughter's doing and how she's an inspiration to all of us with her role in acting now, how have watching them grow inspired you, sort of turning it around, turning the tables, if you will, on that?
Sure. I mean, both over the last couple of years, just kind of watching my son and my daughter, the way that they've been able to kind of change and go with the flow during, the whole pandemic with their schooling and, virtual school and working from home, and, the way that they've worked hard and continued to get, both be on the honor roll and move from Chicago to Vegas and now to Boston, and just kind of seeing how tough they are and how they've been willing to change is kind of inspired me when the days when I'm thinking when I'm having a bad day, like you know upset that something bad happened at work. I'm like, well, your kids are doing it too, and they're being a lot stronger about it than you are right now.
I would think, though, being hard on yourself is a good thing in a way because you, in a sense, there's that. I would think, sort of, as we wrap up this conversation, JJ, that you kind of, to be good at this business, you have to have some perfectionistic genes to you in a way, just the attention to detail. So, how do you find that that comes out in a broadcast now with NESN? But how do you find that that also infiltrates other areas of your life too?
Yeah, I mean, early on in my career, when you have the interview question, like, what would your colleagues say about you? That was definitely the question early on in my, the answer early on in my career is, wow, he really takes everything so seriously in the shows. And I think, over time, you kind of are able to sit back and, like I said earlier, kind of realize that everything's not the end of the world. But obviously, you still have that little perfectionist in you, and I still do. And you know, in the rare moments when oh, I have a typo on one of your lower thirds in the show, and you don't catch it in time, and there's a moment in time where that's just the end of the world. But I think a big thing that I've learned is, okay, the show's over, you have another one tomorrow. um, and we have a great team here, so I'm basically speaking in hypotheticals because I don't even think that's happened yet in any of our shows in the first month or two that we've been on. So uh, but I think just there is a side of perfection that you want to have. I think a big virtue in this business is learning to put it behind you and move on to the next day.
Yeah, I don't think, with how you are and how your team is, it's there's a human aspect of this where nothing's ever perfect. But in the eyes of, like, watchers and listeners and consumers of NESN,
Mhm.
they're going to watch your broadcast and they're going to think they're perfect. But I still probably go back to what you said. There's always something, and that's what makes you great at what you do and what your team is doing, is that there's always that desire for, how can we make this better? How can we improve? And how can we turn this and get this to the next level? My last question for you is this. JJ Leonard is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. If you were to say, and as serious, use the word serious, but I'm sure you have fun too in the workspace as well. How do you step outside of that mindset and allow yourself to sort of deprogram a little bit? Maybe when you get a vacation, a little time off from work. Work can be so all encompassing in media. It sort of takes over our lives. But when you are able to get a little bit of time away from that, what does that look like for you?
Honestly, my favorite vacations are just kind of going, with my family somewhere, whether it be, to the beach, to, when we were out west, we would go to, Santa Barbara, a lot, just really unplug and do nothing for, a week and almost turn off. It's so funny because I'm always been such a big sports fan, but sometimes when that's also your work, it's just nice to unplug and not have to worry about it for 4 or 5 days. So anything with my family is just a great time. I just like seeing new places and new things through the eyes of my kids. So even somewhere that I've been before, taking them to see it for the first time is always fantastic.
JJ Leonard, you've been a sports fan since you were, what, 4, 3 years old. In this conversation, it gives people more reasons than one to be a fan of you. And that's what we wanted to accomplish here on the conversation platform. I'm Bryan Fenley. JJ, thanks so much for doing this, man. I really enjoyed it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.